During the decade-long conflict and the 3 years of post-conflict in Nepal, we have seen a rise in the human rights violations. In comparison to the countries you have worked in the past, where do you see the status of human rights violations of Nepal?
Nepal, I think, is different from those other countries where I had the privilege to serve because the conflict, I think, is more internal. I mentioned East Timor having been colonized, Sierra Leone having been affected by another country. Afghanistan, too, it's well known, has been affected by outside forces. I think a difference in Nepal is that, by and large, the conflict has been very much internal. And by and large, the progress towards resolving the conflict, the peace process, has also been locally driven and locally owned. I think the intervention of the international community, including the United Nations in Nepal, has been relatively light compared to those other countries, and that's a good thing. That it's very important and very, very positive that in Nepal the progress that's been made has been made generally through consensus, through dialogue and discussion and agreement, and with support and assistance from the international community, but without too much involvement of the international community.
We'll continue with our conversation after a short break. Do stay with us.
We cannot rely on a unipolar system, be it in politics, be it in economics, be it in currency.
The Nepalese government, the Nepalese army, they must reach to consensus quite quickly.
The status of women in Nepal, I think it is still an uphill struggle for them.
Based on Buddhism, if we can promote this peace process, I believe that we will have a good future.
If there are frequent bands and hartals and the work gets stopped, then who suffers? It is the people of Nepal.
Welcome back to Power Talks. We are in conversation with Mr. Richard Bennett, the representative of the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights in Nepal. Mr. Richard, during the decade-long conflict in Nepal, thousands were disappeared by both sides at conflict. How is the bill of disappearance progressing?
Well, the ordinance on disappearance has expired, and the government informs us that it is introducing a new bill which will do two things. It will criminalize disappearances, and it will also establish a commission to investigate the disappearances that took place by both sides during the conflict. We have been providing our views at the government's request to ensure that this legislation meets international standards and therefore is effective in achieving its objectives. And it's important for the victims that they achieve their right to know, that is the truth, and secondly, that there is accountability for those responsible.
You took your office in 2007. By then we already had the Maoists join the interim government and democracy restored earlier year. Yet we witnessed one of the highest forms of human rights violations the same year, like the Gaur incident in March and the Kapil Vastu violence in September. We also saw a rise in the human rights abuses caused by the YCL, Young Communist League. How has the investigations progressed so far?
Well, I arrived actually just weeks before the Kapil Vastu incident, so this was really almost my first experience of Nepal. But all of those, as you say, Santosh, were serious incidents that occurred in 2007. And our office has issued reports publicly on Goa, on Kapilvastu, and also on the violations by the YCL during that year. We have followed up, and there has been some follow-up, but I'd like to maybe just focus, due to time, on the Goa incident, and I'd like to use it to illustrate how important it is that justice is done and is seen to be done. In the Goa incident, it was, I think, only in November or December 2007 that FIRs were lodged by the Nepal police, and also in this case by the CPN Maoist. And while there were a few people arrested, those people we informed were later released. There have been no proper investigations of those cases. There have been no prosecutions for those cases. So they remain unfinished business, and it is the obligation of the state, of the government, to fully investigate and bring to justice those responsible for serious violations such as those that took place in Goa. We also made recommendations for improvements in the conduct of the security forces, which, as we witnessed in Goa and in Kapilvastu as well, they fluctuate between doing too little or doing too much and using excessive force. But to refer back to Goa again, what we've observed is that is the taking of, because of the breakdown in the rule of law and the impunity and lack of accountability, there's a tendency for groups to take the law into their own hands. It has been reported that at least 2 of those MPRF who have cadres against whom FIRs were lodged have subsequently been killed. And also on the other side there has been violence. So this taking of the law into people's own hand, this summary justice, is a consequence of a lack of accountability. We've even seen it much more recently here in the Kathmandu Valley, where groups are outraged at serious crimes committed, and because they do not have faith in the system of rule of law, they are tempted to take justice into their own hands, and another crime is then committed, and this results in the overall breakdown of law and order, of rule of law in the society. So what we perceive, and we're using Goa just as an example, is the link between impunity, lack of public security, and rule of law. That if there are no consequences for crimes, then there is a reduction in the faith of the general population, and there is a reduction in generally insecurity in the region.
For most of these incidents in 2007 and even later on, even the government formed investigative commissions. Has your office worked together with the commissions formed by the government, or has it worked separately?
Where requested, our office has cooperated, and we've provided information to those commissions. But it's important that those commissions are independent commissions, that they are not put under pressure by any group, including ourselves, so that they can go about their work in a thorough and professional and independent manner. And so we have spoken to those commissions, and we've provided documentary information to those commissions when it's been requested.